On a sunny holiday morning, a rare sight these days, I heard footsteps entering the living room. John and Emma came in, loaded with baggage and breathing heavily. Upon seeing me, they put on sarcastic smiles and dropped a bombshell: "From today, we're moving in with you. If you don't like it, divorce me and leave." Ignoring my shock, John and the others started spreading their belongings in the living room. Sophie, looking apologetic, followed. I quietly opened my mouth and said, "It's okay, but are you sure I mean, she?" John turned pale upon hearing me, then dashed out of the house. A few minutes later, he called. When I answered, he began shouting so loud it could be heard where Emma was, "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything?" "Oh, I thought I mentioned it before," I replied. After a pause, John said, "Anyway, I'm coming back," and abruptly hung up. Emma looked like she might faint at John's yelling. "I'm looking forward to John coming back," I said. At my words, Emma's shoulders twitched in surprise. "Brace yourself, the retaliation starts now. I'm Alice, a 45-year-old office worker. Last year, I was transferred to a busy department and have been incredibly busy since. I married John when I was 40. We met at a company year-end party where John was invited as a guest. As his hostess, we hit it off, being from the same hometown. John, 5 years my senior, was the assertive type and a godsend to me, who had almost given up on marriage as I approached 40. We married after dating for a year. No wedding ceremony, as he said it was a waste, which left me a bit sad. In retrospect, I should have reconsidered the marriage then. "Hey, you slacked off on laundry again, didn't you?" John is what you'd call a henpecked husband. Having lived alone before marriage, he could do household chores, but he refused, saying, "Men shouldn't do housework." "I plan to do it tonight since I got home late from overtime," I replied. Coming home to be yelled at only exhausted me more. John, displeased with my attitude, began to angrily raise his eyebrows. "Don't talk back, wife. Who do you think provides the food you eat? Honestly, I earn more than John." When we married, he knew this and chose a dual-income lifestyle, but a year into the marriage, he seemed to have completely forgotten. Initially, I argued back, but as John got more heated and yelled more, I started apologizing quickly just to keep the peace. "I'm sorry, it was my fault." "Do you really think so?" "Yes, thank you. It's because of your hard work that we can live this life." Saying so would satisfy John, then he would hum a tune and go take a bath. At first, I found his henpecked behavior manly, but after 3 years, I was fed up. Yet, I didn't choose divorce because my in-laws were wonderful people. I'd go out to lunch with my mother-in-law, Grace, once a month, and my father-in-law, David, gave me birthday gifts. When at the in-laws' house, John was kind and smiled, and we had pleasant times. My own parents died early, so my kind in-laws were as important as real parents. That's why I hesitated on divorce. But there was something I couldn't tolerate: Emma, John's sister-in-law, who lived nearby. Emma, divorced due to her infidelity, now lives alone in an apartment. Apparently, the reason for the divorce was Emma's affair. Since hearing of this, I disliked her. Emma disliked me too, bad-mouthing me even in front of John, who doted on her and joined in rather than reprimanding her. Emma had a daughter, Sophie, whose custody belonged to her ex-husband. Sophie, the spitting image of Emma but completely different in character, was a very good girl. Sophie used to visit Emma about twice a month. Each time, Emma would bring Sophie to our house. "Just a minute, Alice, please feed Sophie something delicious. I'm heading out now." So suddenly, thanks, bye. Emma would rattle this off one-sidedly and leave without waiting for my reply. Each time, Sophie would apologize. I couldn't ignore such an honest girl like Sophie, so I ended up feeding her and taking her to various places. Alice, thank you always. It's okay. Did you have fun? Yes, it was really fun. Can I come again? Of course. Asking me timidly while watching my face, I couldn't say no to Sophie. Plus, I didn't have children of my own, so I found Sophie endearing. But I thought it wasn't good that Emma, her real mom, was never there for Sophie's visits. So, I decided to ask John, hey, whenever Sophie comes, Emma is never around. Can't she spend a little more time with her? I meant only well for Sophie, but John didn't take it that way. His face turned red in an instant, and with a look of anger, he yelled at me, Emma is hurt from her divorce. Unlike you, she's delicate, and yet you blame her. No, it's not like that. Just wondering where she goes every time after dropping Sophie off. There's no need for you to know. Just shut up and listen. I stopped talking further to John, who wouldn't listen at all. After a few apologies, a calmed John suddenly started preparing to go out. I'm heading out. Where are you going? It's my business. You just stay quiet and say have a nice day. John yelled that and slammed the door as he left. Alone in the quiet room, I cried and then seriously began to consider divorce. Though I thought of divorce, I hadn't made up my mind because of the in-laws. Amidst this, Grace invited me for lunch, and I decided to go out after a long time. Where are you going on your day off? I'm going to lunch with John's mom. With Mom? You better not talk about Emma. Why not? I asked back, not understanding his words. John shouted in irritation, can't you think a little? You really are stupid. Just go already and don't talk about Emma. Without waiting for my reply, John pushed me out of the house. Still not satisfied, I met Grace and talked over lunch. By the way, Emma is coming over, right? You knew? I thought so. Grace sighed deeply and then apologized to me. Apparently, Sophie had told her that she was bothering me by coming to see Grace. I thought I raised her strictly, but maybe it's a reaction. She's into nightclubs. Nightclubs, that's right. She seems to have considerable debt. I was surprised by Grace's words. When Emma came to our house, she always dressed in branded clothes and seemed well off. When I told Grace this, she looked even more troubled. That child. We've cut ties with her. So Alice, you should too. John's probably spoiling Emma, right? Grace said that when Emma's affair came to light, John kept clinging to the ex-husband until the end. He even paid off her debts once. I learned that and it was an eye-opener for me. I'm thinking of divorcing John. I'm sorry for the trouble. That's all right. I'll support you, Grace said, holding my hand. Thinking how it would be if my mom were alive, I started planning for the divorce. The preparations progressed meticulously so John wouldn't notice. Hoping to awaken John to reality, I casually mentioned Emma's debts, but John wouldn't listen. Instead, facing John's yelling, I found I could no longer feel love for him. Thanks to the help of the in-laws, I gathered plenty of evidence and learned astonishing truths. Then the day of action arrived. Unexpectedly, on a sunny holiday morning, rare these days, I heard footsteps entering the living room. John and Emma came in, loaded with baggage and breathing heavily. Upon seeing me, they put on sarcastic smiles and dropped a bombshell, we're moving in with you starting today. If you don't like it, divorce me and leave. Ignoring my shock, John and the others started spreading their belongings in the living room. Sophie, looking apologetic, followed. I quietly spoke, "It's okay, but are you sure I mean, she?" John turned pale upon hearing me, then dashed out of the house. A few minutes later, he called. When I answered, he began shouting so loud it could be heard where Emma was, "Are you kidding me? Why didn't you say anything?" "Oh, I thought I mentioned it before," I replied. After a pause, John said, "Anyway, I'm coming back," and abruptly hung up. Emma looked like she might faint at John's yelling. "I'm looking forward to John coming back," I said. At my words, Emma's shoulders twitched in surprise. "Brace yourself, the retaliation starts now." As soon as John returned, he confronted Emma. "Emma, what's this about debts? I didn't hear anything about it." "It's just a small debt," Emma answered, avoiding eye contact. I couldn't help but laugh. Emma glared at me. I decided to respond to that glare. "Amazing, Emma. Calling 150,000 a small debt? I couldn't say that about such a high amount. Rich people are different." 150,000. Emma turned to me with a face that looked about to cry when I casually revealed the amount. But I had no intention of letting her off. I continued unilaterally, "The guy from the nightclub. He recently got married, right?" Emma got dumped. "Huh, I'm not dumped. Once I get this house, he'll come back to me. And when we sell this place, the money." Emma inadvertently spilled her plan and looked at John with an "I messed up" face. John, confused, kept looking back and forth between me and Emma. I decided to tell John the truth. Emma planned to kick me out, then eventually you, and sell this house. With the money, she'd pay off her debts and fund her nightclub guy. "What the hell is that?" John stood there, dumbfounded. He couldn't believe his beloved sister was using him like this. "Was it all a lie? I want to live with Sophie, so let us stay. I was planning to work and support both you and Sophie." Hearing John's words, my head ached. He couldn't support his wife but planned to support his sister and niece. Emma defiantly replied to John's question, "You're just an ATM, big brother. Once we sell the house, I can go back to him. Won't you listen to my request?" "ATM, what's that about?" Enough." Emma, brazen, and John, furious, were leaving me out and yelling at each other. Their fight was ugly and ridiculous. The one who spoke to them wasn't me but Sophie. "Enough, both John and Mom. I don't want to live together, and I only came today to say goodbye." "Sophie, what do you mean?" This shocked both Emma and John, and they stopped fighting to look at Sophie. Sophie sighed deeply, looked straight at Emma, and began to speak slowly. "Mom, you're not interested in my life, right? I think I told you before, but I'm going to study abroad from high school, so today was to say that." "I didn't hear anything like that." Emma raised her voice. Sophie looked at Emma with a cool, disdainful gaze. "Because you never really listened, always chasing after men. I don't need a mom like that. For me, Alice is my mom." "What do you mean?" Emma glared at her as if she were an enemy, but I was just as surprised. Sophie came up to me and hugged me. "Thank you for holding my hand, for the delicious meals, and for listening and taking me places. You felt like a real mom." Sophie's words warmed my heart. I felt a sense of fulfillment and happiness as if everything I had done for Sophie had come to fruition. I never had children, so I often worried if my way of interacting with Sophie was correct. That's why I was even more moved. "Sophie, I too was happy to be with you. Do your best over there too." As I said this and wiped my tears, Sophie smiled at me. "Yeah, I want to call and send messages." "Is that okay?" "Of course." Sophie and I looked at each other and laughed. Emma was watching us resentfully. Then, with a smug smile as if she had an idea, she started laughing. Sophie, I'll go with you. Why, it's hard to live there alone, isn't it? Let's live together. They'll pay for our living expenses, right? I was astounded by her audacity. Sophie beside me looked just as disgusted. Unaware of our reactions, Emma started fantasizing about life after going abroad. Mom, while Sophie's at school, we can go to the beach or shopping. When she's at her part-time job, I'll take a nap. At night, I'll go out a bit. Emma talked only about leisure, with no mention of work. Sophie looked at her with contempt and suddenly burst into laughter. What's so funny? It's hilarious. Why would I want to live with you? Besides, I'm going to be in a dormitory, so you can't come. Emma's face turned red with anger, but Sophie didn't stop there. Just as Emma was about to lash out at Sophie, an interruption came. Enough already. Dad David suddenly appeared in the living room, surprising Emma. Beside him, Grace, her eyebrows raised in anger, said, "Coming here after hearing from Alice, and what do I find? How long will you keep troubling others, Emma?" "Mom, this is a misunderstanding." Sophie decided this on her own. In the middle of Emma's words, Grace approached her and raised her hand. A loud sound echoed in the living room, followed by silence. The first to speak was Emma. "That's awful to hit me." Grace retorted sharply, "You deserve it. I was wrong to leave you alone after causing trouble to Alice. We've arranged for you to stay with a relative. We're going there now." Emma turned pale and looked to John for help, but he averted his gaze. Feeling betrayed, left isolated and despairing, Emma was led out of our house by David. "Hey, I'm sorry. I should have listened to Alice more. I'll listen from now on." "What a naive thought," Grace retorted to John's casual words. To the surprise of John, Grace continued emotionlessly, "I told you before not to involve yourself with Emma, even more so if you're married. But you didn't listen. Now the only choice is divorce." John looked at me, pale-faced. I smiled at him, then feeling slightly relieved, I prepared to drop the bombshell. "Let's get a divorce. I'll also claim alimony for your verbal abuse and let's see, maybe for infidelity too." "Infidelity? What are you talking about?" John stumbled over his words, trying to feign ignorance. I felt pathetic for once thinking such a man was reliable. I pulled out several photos from my bag. "You recognize this woman, don't you? Did you take secret photos? If someone's doing something they shouldn't, isn't it their fault?" John, seemingly out of excuses, just stayed silent, looking frustrated. I laid out the documents and had him sign them. After everything was finalized, I spoke to John with a smile. "Thank you for everything. Though I made more money, did all the housework, and handled everything else, it was me who took care of everything. So take care. Don't forget the payments." John had nothing more to say to my words. I said goodbye to Grace and left our house. I arranged to pick up my belongings later and stayed at a nearby hotel after dropping Sophie off at her home. A clean room, a soft bed, and a space without anyone to complain. That's when I finally regained my freedom after 5 years. The next day, I promptly filed for divorce and became truly free. Grace called to apologize and assure that John would deposit the alimony within a week, which he did in full. Since John had little savings due to giving money to Emma, the in-laws had paid the alimony in advance. Regarding this, they'll get John to repay it in full, so don't worry, they told me. John lost his job and was sent to live with a different relative. He ended up on a farm, working from dawn to dusk without holidays. Escape was impossible without a car, and the mountain roads were too much for John, who had never driven them. I thought it was tough but didn't feel sorry for him. John's affair partner was a club girl who only saw him as a paying customer. She didn't even know he was married and apologized when I met her. She even returned the branded bags John had given her, which I sold and used the money for lunches with Sophie. Emma was sent to live with relatives near the sea, working from sunrise every day. Her once well-maintained hair and nails were now completely ruined. Apparently, she had fallen behind on child support payments for Sophie, and the relatives have covered it, so now she worked unpaid. I could only hope she might change her ways. Sophie, meanwhile, successfully went abroad and now lives in an overseas dormitory. She's gotten close to a girl she shares a room with, and I receive messages about their daily adventures. She's planning to bring her friend during a long break, and I've agreed to host them for sightseeing. As for me, my days are still busy, but without the marriage, my chores are halved, and there's no one to complain. It's a different kind of busy, much more fulfilling. When I dropped Sophie off, I met her dad, Emma's ex-husband, for the first time. A nice guy. We exchanged contacts as we kept in touch about Sophie. We started going out together. I found peace just being with him, something I never had with John. Even I am a bit surprised by these feelings. Sophie is thrilled about me seeing him. On a video call recently, she asked, "When are you getting remarried?" I'm not thinking about it yet, but if he feels the same, maybe someday. To me, Sophie is like a true daughter, and she feels the same about me. Becoming a real family would make me incredibly happy. With that hope in my heart, I had to work today as well.